Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. With me, as always, back from his long journey through, was it just America? Did you do
Just
like a
America,
long,
yeah.
just America road trip, like
Yes,
a
yeah.
month-long road trip? Maybe we'll hear some about that. But with me, as always, is Mr. Cullen McFader, and I am
hmm
Clark Coffey, and we are so thrilled to be back with you after a bit of a break. Today, we're going to be discussing Cullen's pick, which just so happens to be, assuming that you've not read the title, 1972 Alfred Hitchcock Frenzy.
I dare say you are wondering why I am floating around London like this. I am on the famous Thames River, investigating a murder. Rivers can be very sinister places, and in my new film, Frenzy, this river, you may say, was the scene of a very horrible murder.
It's a woman!
Another necktie murder.
Of course, one can never be sure where danger lurks. They tell me a dreadful crime was committed right in this building. My investigation next led me to this innocent alley, of which there are hundreds in London. But I don't think we should stay long. Something unpleasant is about to happen. Here is the scene of another horrible murder. This is the famous London wholesale fruit and vegetable market, Covent Garden. Here you may buy the fruits of evil and the horrors of vegetables. I've heard of a leg of lamb, a leg of chicken, but never a leg of potatoes.
Here, what's wrong?
Look, she's wearing my tie. How'd you like my tie? How do you like it?
I got the tie.
What an
Yes.
interesting selection. This
Yeah.
came out of nowhere. I totally wasn't expecting this one, man. And I haven't seen this movie in forever. So I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. I can't remember too much of this film. Unique pick. I'm excited to discuss it.
hmm
I was totally caught off guard by this one. It's a good selection, dude.
Well, I thought, yeah, I think it's no secret that I'm a big Hitchcock fan. I mean, I think when
Yep.
we did ages ago, we did an episode on kind of what got us into movies, and one of the things that
Right.
I said was that growing up, my dad used to always show me Hitchcock movies and things like that, and so I always sort of saw them as almost contemporary movies. I think I was too young to kind of figure out that they weren't made today.
Yeah.
So I think I just
Sure.
thought that he was a very interesting stylistic kind of director.
Yeah,
Um,
that's like me. That's like me with the '50s War of the Worlds. I'm watching that
mhm,
when I'm like
yeah.
6, and I'm like, I have no idea that this wasn't made like last year.
Yeah,
Doo-doo-doo.
exactly. Yeah, and it kind of removes some of that preconceived notion that people get when
Right.
they go into an old movie and think that it's going to be, boring or flat or something. But
Sure.
and I was surprised that we hadn't done a Hitchcock movie yet, because I mean we're 80 something
Which
episodes
does
into the podcast,
so
and yeah.
so why do you think we've been dancing around that one? I think is it just my
I
take
don't
is that,
know.
at least for me, I guess it's always like I mean, and that's one of the things I think is such an interesting pick here is that, Hitchcock seems like such an obvious choice. Now, obviously, we've picked films that were obvious choices. And so, but yeah, I'm kind of surprised that we're, how many years, how many number of episodes into this, and this is the first Hitchcock film we've done. Yeah, that's,
Hmm.
I was shocked when you told me that. I was like, wait a minute, surely we've done a Hitchcock film before, but
Yeah,
we
yeah.
haven't.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure
And
we've
here
talked
you
about them
picked
plenty
Frenzy.
because I think
Yeah.
the even when we did the episode on Daylight Again, the movie that I did,
Hmm.
I talked about how much influence Hitchcock had on that.
Yeah.
So I think he's come up in so many conversations. Maybe it just kind of, to me, it just almost slipped my mind that we haven't done him. And I think it's also one of those
Right.
things where you don't want to do. I mean, Psycho or Vertigo and Rear Window have all been talked to death. Like it's like, well,
Yeah.
what could we possibly add to that conversation?
I
Whereas,
almost did Rope. I almost did Rope. I came
well, I
really
do. Yeah,
close
Rope's a
to
great one.
picking
Yeah.
Rope. Yeah.
And I think the reason I chose Frenzy was just, yeah, because I'm thinking, it's a movie that not a lot of people outside of, Hitchcock fans have seen, despite the
Mm.
fact that I think it's a quite a good movie. And I think that it's interesting because it's one of his last movies as well.
Yeah.
So
Second
you
to
end
last
up,
film,
yeah,
actually.
second
Yeah.
last to right before Family Plot, and I think this is a superior movie. So I kind of, in my own personal canon, consider this kind of his swan song.
Yeah.
Um, but you also get this very interesting. We're going to talk about this obviously in detail, but this really interesting blend of kind of Hitchcock's. Of course, a director most famous for his work in the 50s and 60s and the 40s and before that. So you have a director known for a lot of like very formalistic choices and very, um, you know, brightly lit studio kind of filmmaking. And not that that doesn't make him boring to me. I love most of his movies. But you end up getting kind of this blend in this movie of this kind of almost like 70s exploitation, kind of like sex
Mm.
crime thriller, things that really seem like something that Hitchcock always would have been heading towards, kind of his natural progression as a filmmaker, because I mean he was always kind of pushing those boundaries.
Hmm.
Especially in something like Psycho, where he was breaking a lot of the Hays Code rules to kind of push the audience further into a level of discomfort. But
Right.
this is kind of the only one of his movies where he really does sort of land directly in that genre, and kind of, if anything, I think has likely, with this movie specifically, cast a massive influence on a lot of later films. But we'll get into that later because we've got so much to talk about there. Um,
Yeah. I want to ask you. I want to ask you a quick question, since you are such a fan. I mean, not to put you on the spot, but I'm curious. There are some who think that what makes me think of this is Tarantino. He's kind of notoriously, or he's been known, like, hey, I'm only making 10 films, and I'm like arbitrarily cutting myself off after my
mhm,
10th film because, almost universally across the board, directors make films when they're past their expiration date, and they're the last films of their filmography end up sucking, and they taint their legacy, so to speak. What are your thoughts on that regarding Hitchcock? It's gosh, I mean, he made so many films,
mhm,
and this, like we said, is his second to last film. And I think you and many other people consider this to be, if not, I don't know if you'd go so far as to say masterpiece, but consider it a pretty darn good film. But then, of course, he
mhm.
had Torn Curtain and Topaz before that, which most people agree are not fantastic films. But what are your thoughts? Does Hitchcock fall into that category of he
I don't
should have quit earlier? Maybe like The Birds should have been his last film, or do you think no? He held
um
up relatively strong to the end. Like, what are your thoughts?
I think he held up pretty. Like, I mean, I think the way I look at it is, and this will be a good throwback for the podcast. I
Yeah.
remember when the original trailer for the Werner Herzog masterclass, somebody said,
Mm-hmm.
there was like a quote about like even his failures are spectacular. That was one of the like splash quotes on the screen at the end of it, just kind of talking
Mm.
about Herzog. And I kind of think about that in the same way as Hitchcock, where it's like, not that I think that, I'm not a big fan of Topaz, and I don't really like Family Plot either. And Torn Curtain, I'm okay with. I enjoy a lot of aspects of Torn Curtain, but
Okay.
um, I think that even in that, it's sort of like, well, I don't like them necessarily as Hitchcock movies. I don't think that they're his best, but at the same time, there's so much that you get out of watching them still because of the choices that he's making. And it's kind of one of those things where you like, I always think back I watch his movies pretty regularly, so it's never like I'm forgetting what he's like as a filmmaker. But quite frequently, I'm sort of like, maybe he's kind of just this immortalized director who has this, the legend of him is much bigger than his movies could ever be. And then you go back and you watch his movies and you're like, no, he was kind of a genius
He
of the
earned it.
form. Like he was
Yep.
really a master of, I mean, you see even some of the shots in this movie that are just so like I was watching it last night with a grin on my face when some of these moments happen, because I'm just like, God, like how could you even think about that as a director? Like how do you think of those choices that he makes, like the famous pull out from the building that we'll get into all that stuff in detail. But I think that the fact that he made this as his second last movie, I think that if you look at the chronology of his filmmaking, I mean, it wasn't that long after Birds that he's only got 2 movies or 3 movies between this and the Birds, right? So
Well,
you can say, there
the
certainly are
Birds
a
in
few
63.
duds.
You
Yeah,
got
Birds
Marnie
and
in
then Marnie.
64.
And I do
Torn
like Marnie
Curtain
a
in
lot.
66. Yep, Torn Curtain in 66. Topaz in 69.
Mhm.
Frenzy in 72. And then you have 76 Family Plot.
Yeah,
So
he was definitely slowing down, obviously, in his age too. So there's a longer period between his movies. But I think if you actually look at the chronology, no, I think that he, maybe I could have done without Family Plot, but I still enjoy watching Family Plot. Like I don't love it, but I think that there's definitely value to that movie. So yeah, I think that he, I don't think that he kind of wore himself out or anything. I think that he's doing stuff in Frenzy that is really, really interesting. Really, some very new things for him that are completely. I mean, it's his first movie to show like explicit nudity. The violence is a lot more visceral in this movie,
new
and
to
yet it
him,
still has.
but let's be clear though, not new to cinema, but
No, of
certainly
course,
new,
yeah.
new to
His first film,
bag of
yeah.
tricks. Yeah.
And,
I mean, I'm not just speaking
so,
about the nudity, of course, but I mean
yeah.
the other things that we'll get into. That we'll get into for sure. Just to clarify.
But yeah, definitely like a more explicitly violent movie than anything else he's done, and it really gets into a lot of, I think, interesting places that kind of are a very interesting kind of alternate history thing to think about like what would Hitchcock have been making through the 70s and 80s if he had lived longer and things like that. And
I think that's all interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's all interesting. But just to play counterpoint, and then we're going to go on to a quick summary of the film, and we're going to dive in. But just to play counterpoint, maybe if he had stopped at the Birds, though, I mean, I don't know. Just as a thought experiment, if that had been his last film, right? And so he goes out on Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho. I mean, maybe if he'd even stopped at Psycho, right? Because the Birds is I don't know, does that hold up, as well as those other films, in today's day and age? I don't know. It's, especially. I mean, and maybe it's just me. I feel like I've been ruined by that movie Birdemic. Now I haven't watched. Have you heard about this? Now look, I haven't seen the whole film. It's not like I've sat down and watched the whole film, but I have seen like clips of the film Birdemic, right?
Yes.
And maybe I'm just ruined.
Birds,
maybe that just ruined me about the like idea of any movie about like birds attacking people. Just turned it into like a giant gimmick.
Well, I mean, interestingly though, I think the Birds has a lot of like kind of these sexual promiscuity kind of undertones about like like almost an earlier version of
which would go on to be a horror film genre. Main
so it's certainly I enjoy the Birds. I have a lot of fond memories of watching that.
But like I said, a thought experiment. Had he gone out on that string of literally masterpieces, right, one after the other, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
But hey, I tend to agree with you though. Look, you're an artist, you're making films. To me, it seems a little bit ridiculous to arbitrarily cut yourself off. If you're still enjoying making movies, to arbitrarily cut yourself off from doing so because you're afraid that you might hurt your legacy, that's, I don't know.
Hey, and I think that also, I mean, I think that you're to me, there's an inherent value in just the creation of art, good or bad. I mean, obviously, I kind of draw a line at like corporate art, like
you mean
a lot
advertising
of things that are out today. But
Oh, I see what you
Like,
like. Marvel.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
we go
just
back
like,
to Marvel.
big,
Yeah.
movies that are made by focus groups and board of directors as opposed to
To sell
being.
toys. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that I've always, not to get too far into the Tarantino conversation, but in relation
No,
to
no.
this, I've always kind of thought that yeah, it's a little bit arbitrary, and it's like, well, why not just keep? Who cares if you
Yeah.
have a
If you
few,
enjoy it. If you're
Yeah.
enjoying it, keep going. I agree with you. Well, hey, why don't you take it away with a brief summary of Frenzy, and then we're going to dive in.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this is a very classically Hitchcock plot. There's a reason that people kind of described it as his return to kind of like the murder thriller suspense genre after doing kind of political movies for the last
Mm.
two. I think he'd done were kind of more about like political thrillers and intrigue. But yeah, basically, it's about this guy named Richard who's let off from his job. He's kind of a bartender, and his boss is a little bit, kind of hard on him because he drinks, but he says that he always pays, gets laid
I love
off.
this bar. I love this boss, by the way.
Yeah,
Right?
God, he's
He's like
funny. Yeah.
he doesn't care. He doesn't care as much that the guy's drinking on the job. Now again, we're in England. This is in the early '70s, so it's a
Mhm.
different time. But he like accuses him of stealing the drinks. I just love it
Yeah.
though. It's
Yeah. He's like, you're not paying. Yeah, it's not about drinking on the job. It's just the fact that he's not paying for them. But he says he is. But anyway, so you kind of get this very interesting introduction to our character where it's like he seems honest, but you also don't quite know. Hitchcock also plays with this idea of kind of setting the audience up to believe that he might be this necktie murderer.
because we
of course
start
the
off
open,
right.
yeah, the
Well,
opening
because
of the movie.
we
Yeah.
open with the movie, right? We've got this beautiful shot, this helicopter shot, that just we're going down the Thames, right? And come on, what's the bridge? What's the drawbridge there that we're flying to? Jeez,
The
now
one in
I'm
Tower Bridge, yeah.
yeah,
Tower
it's
Bridge,
just
yeah.
a beautiful, so beautifully executed.
Mhm.
Like really surprisingly smooth. Anyway, not to get derailed onto the technicals of that, but yeah, and we've got this politician, right? And there's this group of people, and the politician is like, "We're gonna clean up the river. We're gonna da 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 da," and then of course, in like beautiful Hitchcock, humor, ironic humor, there floats the naked body of the victim with the necktie around their neck, and so
Yeah,
then
the
yes,
latest
then we're in.
necktie victim, yeah. And he
So
does
we're
something really
right off the
brilliant, which is
bat.
that they mention the tie, and then it cuts immediately to our character Richard putting on his tie, and so it's kind of this
Our
like
first
subtle
red herring.
implication of yeah, exactly, these red herrings of, is he really the killer? Um, he gets laid off. He has a friend, Bob Rusk, who is kind of offering to help him out and gives
Well, now
him
let's
a
not forget Richard's friend at the
oh yes,
bar
Richard's friend
who
Babs, yeah,
defends
who's
his
kind
honor.
of yep,
Babs is the barmaid there. She defends his
hmm
honor.
yeah,
Um,
and they were kind of
but
having a
anyway,
little bit of a
she'll come into.
relationship.
Yes, I would say they are.
Yeah, and so
Anyway,
then we
sorry.
yeah, so we're introducing these cast of characters. There's Bob Rusk, his friend. Babs is his barmaid friend, who's kind of seeing. His
Now
ex-wife.
I'm curious though. Let me stop you there for a second. When we're introduced to Bob, right? Is it Bob?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, Bob Rusk.
and
Yeah.
Bob Rusk. Now Bob Rusk is going to end up. Now look, this is obviously this recap is like we're not trying to explain every aspect of the film. It's like if you've seen it, but it's been a long time. We're hoping this kind of jogs your memory. If you've not seen it and you just don't want to see it, we're trying to give you enough information that you could kind of follow along with the rest of our conversation. Although you should definitely go see it. But Bob Rusk, played by Barry Foster. I'm curious what your thoughts were. So yeah, so our hero, or maybe not our hero, or the killer, we don't know yet. But he's introduced. His lady's introduced. He gets fired. He goes across the street to hang out with his buddy Bob. And were you almost thrown off by how generous Bob was, right? Like, I mean, right off the bat, right? He's like, "Hey, let me give you some money. Let me give you some food. Let me da da da.
Yeah,
If you
here's a
need
tip on a
anything,
horse that is
if
going
you
to
need,
win.
yeah,
Yeah.
and here's a tip on a horse. And if you need anything, I can do it all. Like, what do you need? Here, let me give you my jacket. Here, do you need some fresh undies? I'll take mine off and give him like,
Mhm.
it's like, it's like, I mean, was it just me? Am I just too sadly cynical and skeptical in this modern era where I just would never ever assume that somebody would be that overwhelmingly nice and generous? But to
Mhm.
me, like right off the bat, I'm like, oh hell, this is not good. Was it just
Yeah.
me? Did you have that
No,
feeling?
I could totally understand. And I think that Hitchcock is trying to not, he's not necessarily being too subtle with that too, where it's like you then later find out because, our Richard's ex-wife she's kind of like a matchmaker in a way. And so that's her
Oh yeah.
business. And so
So
yeah.
that's right. So our man Richard gets fired. He go get some grapes and a tip on a horse from his buddy Bob, working at the vegetable distribution
Yeah,
warehouse or
he's like a
something. I
fruit or
guess
vegetable distributor,
he's
yeah.
in the. I'm in the import export business, baby. Potatoes,
Yeah. Art
carrots. Anyway,
Vandelay.
yeah. I forgot that. That'll always make me laugh. That will always make me laugh, man. And anyway, yes, Art Vandelay,
Importer exporter.
importer exporter. Okay. Before I get way off track here, I am in a distractible mood this morning. So okay, yeah, and so he's gonna pay a visit to his ex-wife, and you're right. She runs his ex-wife runs this matchmaker business, which I didn't
Hmm.
even know they had back then, but
Hmm.
clearly they did. Um, I think of this as like a modern thing with apps and stuff, but yeah, I get this actually existed back then. So she runs a matchmaking business. He goes in, and they kind of have a little bit of not a fight, argument, kind of. You
They
can
raise their
tell that
voices, yeah.
you can tell their 10 years of marriage must have been a wonderful harmony. But being sarcastic, but
Hmm.
anyway. But and so yeah, they kind of have a bit of an argument there, and then you're supposed to take over there. You're supposed to
Oh,
jump
well, the
in,
key
Cullen.
is
It's the
that
back and forth
her
thing.
secretary, yes, of course, yeah, tossing it back to me. The key, of course, is that her secretary hears them arguing. And then,
Right.
unbeknownst to the secretary, the next day, Bob Rusk, our main character, Richard's friend, who offered him all this great stuff, comes in and is basically turned away by Brenda, the matchmaker and our main character's ex-wife, because
We
he
don't have
previously
women like
applied and he
that.
had you had sexual proclivities that were gauche, I suppose. And
Well,
so
what do they say? Yeah, it's like
he's
it's
like, yeah,
kind
he's
of funny the language they use. It's
psychosexual,
like we don't
yeah.
we don't we don't have clientele with proclivities in that.
Mm,
I don't know. It's very British. I
department.
can't. In
Yeah. Um,
proclivities in that department. Yeah.
and so he
And of
gets,
course, it's not
of course,
specific. It's not specific, but we do
yeah.
get the idea. Our imaginations are let to run wild as to what those proclivities may be.
Hmm. And another key here is that the secretary is out at this moment. She's not in. So
Right. Of course.
we then see the first murder of the film on camera, and we get
Which
Bob
is
Rusk
super
murders.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, very, very. It's actually quite, again, very
It is
visceral.
not. This is not a pleasant viewing experience at all.
Yeah,
This is.
and
I was
it's very
actually pretty.
violent. There's nudity.
Yep.
There's, yeah.
Well, but
But
it's not
yes.
even. It's not even that it's like. It's not violent in the sense of what we would consider like modern violence, right? Where there's like the thrashing and gnashing and throwing around and
And
hitting
gore or whatever. Yeah.
and there's no gore, but it is just almost because it's like in the opposite of this. It's like
Hmm.
just yeah, it was like very unsettling. I mean, very effective because it's supposed to be. And in watching it, I mean, we're still in the summary here, so I don't want to get too far off. But while we're talking about it, I mean, it was in this scene where I had this very kind of like um, you know, like immediate kind of reaction of like, oh my gosh, this is kind of this feels like a precursor to what horror would become
Hmm.
pretty soon
Yeah,
with Texas
definitely. Yeah.
Chainsaw Massacre and Friday the 13th and Halloween. I felt like we were looking at kind of like some of the genesis of that, or maybe
Hmm.
it was that he was incorporating, some of where like exploitation films were starting to go in the
Hmm.
70s, in the early
Yeah.
70s, and he was kind of incorporating some of that. But I was, and it's not that he hasn't done some things like this before. I mean, I think about Psycho and the way that's shot and cut. You can certainly see like a thread here of his technique, shifting. It's not like came out of nowhere, but
Hmm.
that's kind of where my mind kind of went. I was like, whoa, this seems to kind of point to some of that.
Yeah.
Where
It's
you
definitely pushing the
did you
line
get a
further than
sense?
he ever
Yeah,
has. Yeah.
yeah.
Another key, other than the secretary being absent here too, is that Bob Rusk says right before he murders Brenda that she's his type. That he has this line of saying, you're my type. Now here is where the very Hitchcock kind of I don't know what I would call it, but wrongfully accusation sort of that sort of thing begins, which is that Bob murders Brenda.
It's like the everyman being accused of a crime or being put in some kind of like, they think he's a spy, they think he's a murderer, and I'm just the everyman regular dude. What's going on? Kind of that thing.
And so Bob leaves but has a key. I can't remember exactly where he says that I think he says he swiped the key or something, and has a key to the office, locks the office, and leaves. Right as
you were probably checking Instagram at that moment.
Yes, yeah. Right as Richard Blaney enters the. Oh yes, of course, because he entered. Yeah, Richard Blaney enters. The door is locked. He doesn't see Bob Rusk leave, and then so he turns around and leaves as well. Our secretary is just returning from her lunch break and
comes
sees
right back.
Richard leaving and assumes that he was the one that was just in the building, despite the fact that he couldn't get in, and we know that he was not the murderer. So she goes up, finds the body, and then.
Well, no, but in a Hitchcockian, this is one of his great. This was kind of brilliance, right? This is Hitchcock brilliance. Yeah. Instead of us like going up inside the building and being with the secretary and watch her open the door and sit down her purse and kind of do this and that, and then call out to her coworker. Oh, there's no response. Oh, I should go check. Oh, I opened the door and oh no, murdered person. Instead of any of that, right? We're outside. We stay on the same shot. We watch Richard leave.
Yeah, we watch her.
We have the same wide. We have the exterior of the building. We watch the secretary go in. It's just, and we're anticipating.
Yeah, we just sit outside and watch the door.
We know what she's going to see. We know what she's going to see. And then, of course, it's the scream. And another brilliant touch, right? It's not just that there's the scream. We have two other women now, pedestrians, walking, just walking into the scene. They're just going about their business. And, of course, Hitchcock has them there to react to the scream along with us.
Yeah. So you don't see anything inside the building after that, and it's great. He does that kind of a few times in this movie where he'll play with sound and kind of just use the sound design as a way to
because I'm curious. Let's pause here for a minute. What are your thoughts? I mean, are there films today that would handle this in this way?
I think there are very few directors that would, but I can think of a few that kind of have, interesting choice making like this, but definitely few and far between in terms of the kind of the subtlety and the restraint that Hitchcock shows. I think that's one of the things that I find so interesting about Hitchcock is that he so often shows a lot of restraint in these ways and it to a very effective end, and in my opinion,
I think it's a confidence in the audience. I think it's a confidence in the audience is what is my kind of interpretation. It's like I think it is it's a reliance on the audience's imagination and a confidence in their imagination that you don't have to show now. But of course, in the scene that we just saw before that with the actual murder, I mean, he didn't leave anything to the imagination there. It was extremely graphic and extremely, I mean, he put it all out there. So obviously, what I kind of see is this interesting dynamic is that you have this, like, we go from one extreme to the other. So there's this like great dynamic range. So he's not choosing to shoot every single scene this way. But there's a really interesting dynamic range, almost if you kind of make an analogy to music, right? There's like these very, very like soft lows and then these very dramatic high highs, but there's this huge dramatic range or dynamic range rather, and dramatic range that's what I think is so interesting here. That's what I feel like sometimes I feel lacking in a lot of films. And to be frank, it was probably lacking in films in that era too. So I'm not trying to make that age old, like, today's movies, they just stink. But I just think across the board, we don't see very often, or maybe it's not as much as I would like to see that dynamic range, in ways to approach scenes. Anywho.
Well, I also think it engages you in a way that seeing her go, like, I can imagine Hitchcock saying, why do we need to see her go up and enter and find the body when we know what she's going to find? And rather, you kind of engage the audience, like you said, in this
absolutely
imaginative sense of, well, why not put a little flair on this and have it be something that the audience sort of is like the suspense of it also. I mean, you know that she's going to
There's
go
the
in there.
key.
You know that she's
There's
going
the
to, you know
key.
that you're going to find a scream.
You're waiting for it. You're
Or
waiting
hear a
for it.
scream.
You're waiting for it.
And
You're
so,
waiting
yeah,
for
yeah,
it.
exactly. You're waiting for it. And you're just waiting for it to scream. And I almost like, even when I was watching it last night, I remember thinking to myself, I was like, okay, she's going up the stairs. She's unlocking the door.
You see every.
She's
You
going
see
in the
every.
main room. And it's
Yep.
like you don't see any of that though. You're just looking at the entrance of on the street. And so then when we finally get to that scream, you're expecting it, but it's like, you know, it's like letting off a firework or something where it's like, you know, that the bang is coming.
Yeah, you're watching the
but
fuse. You're
just
watching the
anticipating
fuse.
exactly. Yeah.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Anyway, it's something that stands out to me consistently with Hitchcock's work. Of course, I'm not. There's nothing, revelatory there, of course. But okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So
I mean,
now,
to briefly summarize too, and just kind of like, we don't have to go through obviously the details of everything, but essentially the movie
Every
then
shot, every
becomes
shot.
about Richard Blaney trying to evade police because the secretary, of course, is, understandably says he was here yesterday, he was yelling, and they got into a row, and now, he's obviously the murderer, and so we've got this very interesting thing where Richard Blaney has to kind of profess his innocence to everyone that he sees, and needs to get help from people. And Babs specifically, she believes that he's innocent as well, because there's she says there's no way that he could have been there. And then we find out, of course, we've already known this, but Bob Rusk is of course kind of egging him on and playing him as a fool, because we don't know, or the character doesn't know, that Bob Rusk is of course the killer. And
Right.
so you just have this very interesting kind of dynamic of this innocent man who's charged with something, but that also allows the killer to kind of take a little bit more of a, have a little bit more freedom with what he's doing, because he's like, oh, they're off looking for this other guy, and
let's just pause for a minute in this. It's interesting to me that Richard, the innocent character, I mean, he's not portrayed as a great guy at all.
No.
He's I mean, really, he's kind of about like a roustabout, like just, I mean, he's like not got a job, or he barely had a job whenever we see him. Now he's fired. He doesn't have any money. He's like, he's pitches a fit with his
Kind of belligerent,
ex-wife at her place of business, totally disrespecting her and her work and her business. Then somehow, I don't know how or why, she's kind enough to invite him to dinner, and he's an ass there at dinner, and he's literally like breaking glassware. I mean, it's like, he's just not really a great dude, really. But he's also not a horrible dude. He's just a dude. But it's just interesting. I just wanted to pause for a minute, because I think a lot of times in movies, right, where you have this character set up, right, the whole premise is like, oh, it's like unjustly, this character is going to be unjustly seen as guilty, and da 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 da. That we often like kind of have this character, okay, well, we really have to like this character, like really has to be a likable person, but it's not the case here. Not the case here at all. Sorry, I just wanted to interject.
No, I mean, I think that is a really good point, that he's not a particularly, I mean, he's not an unlikable character, but he's very much an everyman. He's flawed, and he's not very polite. Again, as you said, he's kind of belligerent, and he drinks a lot, and so he's definitely not someone that you're kind of almost constantly saying like, okay, well, maybe just be a little bit kinder to people, and maybe they help you out.
But
yeah,
for
so
sure.
the movie goes on with that, and then eventually he is actually found and arrested, and Babs is also killed. That's a great scene too.
Well,
we should talk about
and how he's arrested, of course, is pretty interesting, right? I mean,
yeah.
now we kind of revisit this, right? So because he goes to Bob for help. Bob's like, hey, you could stay at my place, and just as like slick and smooth and as generous as they come. Here, yeah, have a few drinks, make yourself at home, have a blast, do whatever you want. And of course, he's gone, and he's called the cops on his buddy. So,
and also put all the evidence in his own bag, so that the purse and the shoes and all that. And, and so that's when he, of course, realized that Bob is actually the killer, because
Dun, dun,
Babs.
dun.
But I do actually want to discuss too the murder of Babs, which is just, I think, a fantastic, like, so Hitchcock, and you can just see where someone like De Palma would totally pull from that.
I
But
feel
we've
like this
got
could be you could take this film and you could take the scene and just plop it right into a De Palma
yeah,
film, and
yeah.
you would just be like, yep, boom, De
So
Palma,
we've got
absolutely.
we've got Babs runs into Bob Rusk, and he sort of says, well, hey, you guys are running off to Paris tomorrow, why don't you come and stay with me tonight?
Hey, I'm the
Well,
nicest dude in
yeah,
the
I'm the nicest guy,
world.
yeah, I'll give you a nice
Hey, what do
room.
you need?
And
Take my
so they
place. Here's my room.
yeah, here's some booze for you. So they end up going back to his place, and it's all in one shot. We see them walking up the stairs, shot in studio, and I point that out for a very specific reason. But yeah, so they're shot in studio. They're walking up the stairs. They go into his place, and the last thing we hear is Bob Rusk say to Babs, he says, you're actually kind of my type," and like that line that he said to Brenda
It's
earlier.
so
And then they go in, they close the door, and we pull out. The camera pulls back from the
it's
door.
so cringy. It's so
It's very cringy, yeah.
cringy.
And I think almost intentionally
can
so too.
No, it has to be. Of
Yeah.
course. I mean, this whole character is so just like this, like playing the super nice, generous guy character. Is just,
Yeah,
it's yeah. It had to have been fun for the actor, but no, and I don't know why this is my. So yes, that I don't mean to interrupt you. We're going to finish this discussion of this amazing shot, but there's just this little detail that stands out to me, man. So So she is in front of him. They're walking up the stairs. She's in front, couple steps above. They're walking up the stairs to the front door, and there's this moment when they get a few stairs away from the door that he's going to unlock, where, like you said, he closes it as he says, "You're my type." There's this moment where he like grabs her shoulder and like holds her back from walking up the stairs so that he can like like burst in front of her and get the door open real fast, like unlock it. It was just like this little detail. I don't know if that was direction. I don't know if that was actor's choice. I don't know if it was even just a pragmatic thing, like narrow stairway. There's not much room at the top of the stairs, and he needed to be the one that opened the door. Just totally just pragmatic blocking. But I don't know why that little thing stood out as such an interesting character moment, though, for me personally.
Yeah.
I don't know if
But
Anyway,
yeah, so
I
we,
just
but
wanted
we
to point
pull
that
out
out.
from that. We've pulled from down the stairs, still in the studio. We kind of exit onto the street, and then Hitchcock does a very classic rope move of him, and this is very Spielberg used this in Jaws too, where someone passes the camera, and as they pass the camera, then we switch to an actual location shot, but you don't notice the camera. You don't really. I mean, it's obvious nowadays because of course there was a different film stock being used.
It's
and
pretty
stuff, and it looks
smooth
a
though.
bit different,
No,
but
but
it is
it's pretty smooth.
the move
It
is very smooth. And
Yep.
so so the person passes the camera, and then we're out on the street, and this is where it's also
we're
really
hiding a
interesting
cut
in relation
is what
to
is what
they
just
hide
for
the
people
cut
out there to be clear. You're hiding a cut
from the
with a
studio
person
to the
switching across
location.
Yep.
But if we actually kind of contrasting with the discovery of Brenda's body, you almost expect as we pull out on the street and we see all these people passing to hear a scream or something like that, but nothing happens. It just stays completely silent. We just see the people walking by on the street, completely unaware that there's a murder going on
silent.
above them.
I want to add to this. It's not that it's completely silent. I think this is an important thing to mention real quickly about selling that cut, that hidden cut, is the sound design.
Oh,
because
yes.
as we're moving backwards down the stairs, and the stairs, we're like having to kind of spiral around. They're not spiral stairs, but it's like the back and forth.
Yeah, there's like a
kind of,
landing at the top that kind of goes left. Yeah.
So we're kind of like sweeping around that. We're coming down as we get close to the entrance to the building, we hear all the hustle and bustle of outside, right? We start to hear people talking. We hear cars. We hear traffic, like all these things happening. And so I really feel it's that sound, of course. And then as we exit the building entrance and we're out on the street, that's what really sells that hidden cut.
Yeah. That sound fading up and smoothly kind of transitioning from inside to outside. Yeah, no, it's definitely it's an incredible shot. Like that's one of the shots that just made me kind of grin.
It's a standout. It's a standout.
And then I mean the next bit too that I think is so Hitchcock, where Bob Rusk is trying to dispose of Bab's body, and he puts her in like a potato sack and throws her in a truck,
this is
and then
just
realizes
this is almost like Three Stooges or something. Like
yes,
it's just, I feel
but I
like
think
this
it's
is
brilliant too because it's such a Hitchcock thing to almost make you fearful that the killer, who we know is the killer, is going to be caught. Like you're almost you're with him for this extended kind of 10-minute sequence where he's in the back of a potato truck because he didn't realize that Babs has stolen his pin, like he has like a little pin that he wears with his initials on it.
Well, it's his tie pin. Let's make it
tie
clear
pin,
that it's specifically a tie pin.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
with
he
his
always takes
initial
it off
on it.
before and so so he realized, he dumps her body, he comes back to his little flat, realizes that the pin is gone and it can only be on her body, so he goes back in, kind of climbs into the potato truck drives off, and then we get this great scene of him having to dig through the potatoes. Someone pulls over to tell the truck driver that his the back of his truck is open and that he's got to close it. So you have all these little moments where it's like you think, oh God, is he going to be caught? And then you kind of think to yourself like, well, wait, why am I almost rooting for the killer in this instance? But Hitchcock does he just has such great skill at putting you in the mind of the killer in this one scene, and sort of understanding
it's even the moment that he realizes.
Yeah.
It's even the moment he realizes that the pin is gone.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, we're frankly, we're immediately almost like in, even though you're right, like we're sympathizing with him, with the killer, and we're putting ourselves in that position. And I mean, it's like literally immediately, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's going through all of his murder victim's clothes. He's like looking all over the house. He's like, oh, then we have this realization it's in the potato truck. He's got to go back over there. And you're right. Hitchcock does this brilliantly. And now for the next, like you said, 10 plus minutes, it's this extended scene where he's trying to retrieve this tie pin, even with, the rigor mortis that's set in to her hand. And he has to like
Break
by
her
one,
fingers, yeah.
Break the fingers, one by one. I mean, Hitchcock just lingers on this and lingers on
and
this.
The sound of the the cracking.
Of the cracking finger. Yes, yes. No,
Yeah,
it's
so
quite brilliant.
It's really,
but there is
it's a really
humor
great,
there too, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he plays it. There's definitely like a element of, just like you said, this Three Stooges, where he's being tossed around in the back of this truck and potatoes everywhere, and he's filthy by the time he gets out.
Potatoes
are
are flying out.
Stop.
Yep.
And so then, of course, we wrap up with the film. Our main character gets sentenced to prison for the murders, and then
what are your thoughts on this? Like, I'm curious. So yeah, so he's right. So he's, ultimately he's, now it's two women who were known to Richard. It's like, there's no way this is coincidence. He's clearly the murderer. I mean,
he was
the
found
secretary
with the his bag,
pointed him out. He's found with the murder victim's stuff in his bag. I mean, it's, case closed kind of thing. But it's interesting. It's just like such a quick cut in time. I mean, Hitchcock doesn't waste any time. I feel like this is a thing, like a lot of movies would spend some time like, oh, okay, we've got our lead is erroneously, accused of this horrible crime. He's got to like sit in jail and await his trial. And now he's the trial and he's like defending himself. And, oh no, I'm innocent. I swear, or would it be like, we'd spend at least.
Yeah. And he even
like,
calls out, he says it's Bob Rusk. He's the real killer.
But I mean, but I just mean the efficiency with which this is literally like, there's literally one scene, which is like one camera angle where we're outside the door of the courtroom. We hear hardly any of it, and it's all we see is like the judge is convicting him, and you're right, and he at these kind of like is kind of yelling, like, it was this other guy, it was Bob, and now since I've been convicted of murder, I might as well go ahead and actually do it. I'm gonna find him and kill him. But it's interesting the way, like the efficiency with which this whole moment of time, right, in the story is just kind of condensed into this one, maybe like 45 second shot.
Really
it's
quick
not even
montage almost,
we don't even have it's just extremely quick. But it was just kind of interesting to kind of compare that to different ways that different filmmakers might handle that. I just feel like, oh boy, a lot of other films would have spent time on that and would have tried to milk it, basically, right?
Yeah.
Would have.
Well, and there's there's this really brilliant kind of thing too with it that, we really waste. You barely even see him in prison. Like he almost immediately kind of fakes his injury or gets really injured, but intentionally injures himself so he can go to the hospital. But then another thing that I think is just fantastic is that there's this kind of repeating dynamic between the chief inspector and his wife, where he kind of keeps uncovering, these
we haven't talked about this
clues.
At all. We got to talk about this.
So there's this funny little running gag with the chief inspector and his
throughout
wife,
the whole
where she
movie,
keeps making him these like very adventurous meals of like this fish stew that has all these like squids and
fish
things like that. And
heads,
especially back in the
pig's
the
feet.
70s in Britain, this would have been like who's
Dude,
heard
I
of
don't
it.
know about 70s in Britain. Like right now, I don't want fish head and
Yeah,
pig's
true.
feet.
Yeah,
Like
pig's feet.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
look, 2024, I don't want to be eating
Although, hey,
that. No,
those
thank
those
you.
Cornish hens I thought looked pretty good, or the duck or whatever it was. Those little
No, but the
little
whole
tiny
point was
duck.
that it was like
It was
no
so
food.
tough.
It was
Yeah, it
like the
was. Yeah,
size of like yeah, it was tiny. No,
there was. Yeah,
thank you for bringing this up because like during the whole right, so during this whole, all the shenanigans that are going on here, you've got this like great interaction where the chief inspector Timothy Oxford, played by Alec McGowan, and his wife, which is played by Vivian Merchant.
hmm
Um, is it you've got all of these kind of a series of I can't remember now, what is it, two, three, four of these scenes where he's at home and he's kind of, and basically what this is, he's talking to his wife, he's explaining the case to the wife, and as we go through the film, and it's basically a fun way to kind of package some exposition for us,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
audience, is what Hitchcock is doing here. And to make that kind of fun, what he's done is he's put this running gag where this and they're a loving couple. He's doing his best to be supportive of his wife and her adventures in cuisine and
hmm
cooking, but he's sitting down at the table and he's being served these just and I mean, and Hitchcock films this with like all the visceral close-upness that you could, I mean, it's just fish heads and squids and weird sauces and pig's feet, and but there's just this running gag of him having to like not being able to eat at the end of a long day while he's explaining the case to his wife.
hmm
And I don't know, I just
And his
found
wife
that
almost
so
keeps like
so
revealing these clues for him, almost like thinking of it in a completely
yep,
different way. And
yep,
and
yep,
so he
yep,
keeps kind
yep.
of coming on to these
It's quite
newfound
fun.
discoveries from
No,
and his wife, Vivian Merchant is just fantastic, and her the voice that she's doing is hilarious. But so we end up having this great, kind of the final moment of that
well,
is
and it's interesting to point out. I just want to point out too that the police are not, look, they're not shown as incompetent. They're not shown as like bad guys. They're not
mhm,
trying to, like, they really are trying to catch the right guy. And I mean, even going so far as, this is something I feel like almost an innocence of that era, or maybe it's a cultural difference between how police are generally viewed in England versus in the United States.
yeah, yeah,
But I mean, it's, the instant he gets that, this chief gets a sense that he might have made a mistake, and he gets that sense in the courtroom, right? Hitchcock kind of actually comes back, right? We hear Richard saying, well, now that I've been convicted of murder, I should go ahead and just actually do it. I'm going to get Bob. Hitchcock kind of brings us back to now
hmm
the chief is, we focus on the chief. He's in the courtroom. So we've kind of have this little flashback kind of deal. And he's replaying that in his mind, or he's like paying attention. And we kind of see the light bulb go on in his mind of like, whoa, hey, maybe there's something, maybe we got the wrong guy. And
yeah,
so he actually is really determined to get to the bottom of that, to figure it out.
yes, yeah. Yeah, and so there's these great, and then you have this great kind of ending where of course Richard goes to Bob's place to kill him and take revenge after he kind of breaks out of the prison hospital
Right.
and gets there, and you think again this one kind of final red herring where he gets in and there's a dead body in there, a new victim, and right
Well,
as
but what
as
we think though, all we see is the blonde hair, which of course
yes,
is
yeah,
our man Bob has this beautiful, very blonde head of hair, and so
yeah,
that's all we see sticking out of the bed. And so Richard walks up to him with the
with a
crowbar,
tire iron, yeah,
whack,
yeah,
or tire iron. I mean, yeah, whack, 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 and then the arm falls, and it's clearly the arm of a woman. And he's
hmm
like, and we're like, now he really has murdered someone.
yeah,
Oh
yeah. But
no!
then we
And
see, of
then
course, the tie
in
around the
walks
neck, yeah,
in Chief
the
Inspector Timothy
inspector,
Oxford.
yeah.
Oh no, no, no. Oh, but wait. Timothy knows that he's like so we have this nice little double fake out at the end
Yeah, kind of like The
where,
Sting almost, where it's like you think that he's been
yep,
caught, and then you hear bump, bump, bump coming up the stairs,
yep,
and they kind of hide, and in walks Bob with a big kind of carrying case to
big
put the
giant
body in.
trunk to put the
Yeah,
body in. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and then we end
And
there,
he's
and it's
not
great.
wearing his tie. And then
Yes,
you
not wearing his tie,
you
and the chief
and I
inspector
just
says, yeah,
Chief Inspector is like what does he say? What's the line? What's the line that ends the
He says
film?
something
It's
like,
like,
yeah, where's your tie? Or something about the tie.
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
remember
It's
what he
like, you
says. Yeah.
forgot your tie or something like that. Or yeah,
Mhm.
and then it's like, then he just drops the trunk and we go to credits, and it's
Yeah.
almost like this, like
Yes.
just this beautiful little pat, like kind of humorous. It's like the inspector. It's not like he's in the room with a man who's a serial killer. It's just kind of like, I'll just like tell a joke and stand here, and and then the killer won't try to get away, and there won't be a fight. But it's like, well, I guess I've been had.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
I
it's
love
great.
it though.
It
No, I'm not
reminds me
making fun
honestly
of
of
it.
kind of the ending of the original taking of Pelham 123, when you have
Ah,
the guy has the cold and he sneezes right at the end, and then of course the detective kind of opens his
yep,
door
yep,
again
yep,
and looks in. It's
yep,
like,
yep,
I
yep.
gotcha.
It's
Um,
beautiful, which is beautiful.
but I
Yeah,
think, and I
no, and
think that
I'm
that
not making
humor
fun
is
of it.
really what separates Hitchcock from so many other, not only horror and thriller and suspense filmmakers, but just that, like, he just
Yeah,
has this great way of infusing. And even though, again, the tone seems like it wouldn't fit, he really does kind of make it, it works in every instance,
yeah,
in
it
this one at
works.
least. And
Yep.
I think that was, one of the things that I alluded to, wanted to talk about earlier, was just this idea of, like, this is kind of the closest I think we get to seeing what Hitchcock would have been like if he continued making movies in the 70s and 80s. And I think you
Yeah.
end up getting a lot of perhaps another angle to look at that, though, is that you see the work of De Palma, of Polanski, of
Well, I was
Spielberg,
gonna
of
say,
Shyamalan, and you kind of see so much
yeah,
Hitchcock in all of their work too. I mean, especially like both Shyamalan and
and De
Polanski,
Palma. Oh,
and De Palma, of
okay,
course,
yeah.
but in Polanski's movie with Harrison Ford, um, which is, let me get it up here because I don't want to, Frantic, yeah, it's kind of similar name to this actually, Frantic, where it's very similar. It's a very Hitchcockian plot about Harrison Ford and his wife in Paris, and
I
his
haven't
wife is murdered, and he's kind of
seen
framed
that in a
for it.
minute. Yeah,
But both in that movie, there is quite literally a scene where Harrison Ford is putting on the shower. He's taking a shower, and it is shot in the exact same way as the Psycho shower scene. And then I'm
yeah.
thinking also in Shyamalan's, I think it's in The Happening with Mark Wahlberg, I believe, which isn't a
Oh,
great movie. But
oh,
there's this
one of. I
moment
mean,
when
really. Wait,
Wahlberg,
wait. Can we? Okay, no. You finish your thought, and then we do have to talk about the
yes,
happening
yeah,
for
yeah.
just one
But
second. But finish your thought.
Wahlberg
Sorry, I'm just
wakes
so
up
excited.
in this old woman's house, and there's this it's just shot like Hitchcock, the way that he sets
Yeah,
up this scene in this old woman's house. And I think that it's very interesting to see these directors who so clearly, I mean, again, De Palma. The reason I didn't even mention
so
De Palma
clearly
here is because like
inspired.
every single scene from a De Palma movie can be kind of
Yeah.
traced back to something with Hitchcock. I think De Palma is very, very open about that.
I
And
mean, I think,
Spielberg, of course. I mean, Jaws.
and I think that
Yeah.
I think De Palma is what Hitchcock would have if Hitchcock would like
Mhm.
just were immortal and just kept making films, through the late '80s into the early '90s. I mean, I think that's De Palma is as close as you're going to get to what his films would have
Yeah.
potentially looked like. I think.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
But
100%.
you
Yeah.
you mentioned The Happening, and I it's interesting with M. Night's films. I mean, not that this is what this episode is about, and we've not done. Have we done any of his films?
No.
For okay,
No,
maybe
I don't think
sometime
we
we'll
have.
have
No.
to do that. But I feel like with The Happening, I don't know if I've ever seen a film made by a director who has so much potential and can
Hmm.
clearly. I mean, I do feel like he is a very talented filmmaker, and when he's on, I really think especially his visual storytelling is. I mean, this if he were like a role playing character in a video game, like visual storytelling would be like the highest, like that's his highest
Oh, be
stat, right?
maxed out. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Maxed out, man. And
Yeah.
then writing, I don't know, might be kind of, it's going to be definitely, it's going to be a lot lower than that. I don't know if it's one of his weakest stats, but it's like, but it's just, I don't know if I can think of a movie that is so laughably horrible made by such a talented director with so much potential. Now, I've not
Hmm.
seen the Airbender film, which I heard was like his
That
Airbender.
one
I've
is
not even
really
seen it.
bad. Yeah.
I don't
I've
know
seen
if
that
that's
one.
worse
Yeah.
than The Happening,
Oh,
but
definitely. Yeah.
is it really? Wow, I'm
I
gonna
can
have to
watch
watch
The
that thing.
Happening and have a fun time with it. The Last
No,
Airbender is just awful.
but but again, there are scenes in The Happening that are so good that like
Hmm.
there is some visual stelly there are scenes that are so brilliant and then juxtaposed so instantly with scenes that are so horrible. I'm just like, it is shocking. Like, I don't know if I mean, you want to talk about dynamic range, but that's dynamic range in a whole different
Yeah,
direction than what I
yeah.
was referring to earlier. This is like going from exceptionally well done to holy crap, I've seen student films that make this, that are like Academy Award winning films compared to this, this moment in this film. It's just mind blowing. Anyway,
Hmm.
I like I said, I was feeling kind of just tangential today, so just get
Yeah,
everything in
yeah.
here. But
No, but I
no,
think
I,
I think
I
that you get this really interesting thing. I mean, I'm actually speaking of Shyamalan as well. I'm hoping to see his new movie either tonight or tomorrow. So we'll
wait,
have to
what's
see
this?
how
Is
that
it
is.
trap
Trap,
or
yeah,
yeah?
and all shot up here, shot in Toronto.
And
So there you
and
go.
and look, and I will still look. I will put this out there, and I will stick with it. I will defend this. I think that Unbreakable is the best superhero comic book movie
Mm,
since the original Superman with not like the Donner Superman with
yeah, yeah.
Christopher Reeves, the first film of that, whatever how many there were, 4 or 5 or so. I really, I'll stick with that. That it's probably actually a better film potentially than that one, but I just have so much emotional connection to that Superman film because when I was a child. So I admit that I am clouded with nostalgia and emotion. So it's hard for me to compare them. But Unbreakable, I would put it out there, best comic book film of at least the past several decades.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's my
No, I think
take.
that
I'm
I
sticking
think
with
that
it.
it's definitely. I love Unbreakable. I mean, again, a lot of Hitchcock stuff in there too.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I mean, you look at these directors who, again, like you said, De Palma is basically, yeah, virtually what Hitchcock likely would have continued to do and be as a filmmaker. But
Yeah.
again, I mean, I think that like there's
And
so
we've
much
done
of
De Palma,
him.
right? I know we've done
Yeah, we've done
Carrie.
Carrie. Yeah,
Have
I
we
think
done
that
any other
might
De
be the only
Palma?
one that we've done. I don't know if we've done
Okay.
another De Palma, unless we did Cape Fear, but I don't think we did Cape Fear.
Well,
Well, I guess
wait,
that's no,
Cape
that's
Cape Fear or
Scorsese. Yeah, of
Scorsese?
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But Scorsese doing again. That's another very interesting thing. That was I love Cape Fear because that seems like Scorsese doing Hitchcock. Like that movie is
Yeah.
so Hitchcock
I've
and it
got to
uses the
revisit that.
original.
I've seen
Yeah.
that. I saw that film only once, and I saw it in the theater on its original release, and I haven't seen
Hmm.
it since. I do need to revisit that.
That's a lot. I love that movie. Yeah, that one's fun.
So many
And
films in so little time.
uses the original Herman score, which is another thing I wanted to talk about this, which
Well,
is
let's
that I
talk
think
about
that
that as
the
we.
one
Yeah.
thing I feel is, and I don't mind the score in this movie. I think it's fine, and there's not a
No.
lot of it. But I think
No.
the one thing as I sit in, watch this movie and that opening shot with, where it flies over London and goes down through the bridge and all that, and there's this kind of like boisterous big band kind of score playing, and I just sit there and go, man, what would Herman have
Mm,
done for this? And it's like I think
mm.
of Herman and Hitchcock as kind of the original
It's
like
like
Spielberg and
chocolate
Williams.
and peanut butter. Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
like
it's
it's like you get
you're
this
right.
you
It's
get
like
this they
Spielberg
had
and Williams.
such
Yeah.
perfect kind of synergy, and it's a very unfortunate, kind of sad story that they had a falling out and then they never spoke again, and,
Now,
and
again,
Hitchcock
I don't ever
died.
mean to
And
put you. The intention is not to put you on the spot, but do we
Mhm.
know exact, or maybe not just we, but does the world know? Like, what was their falling out? Was it just
Yeah, yeah,
personal, or did?
basically, so it was that they were doing, I can't remember which film it was. It might have been Marnie or Torn Curtain. It was one of the
Yeah,
later ones, but they were doing a
but right
movie,
before
and
this film,
yeah, and
or near, yeah.
Hitchcock basically was unhappy with Herman's score and replaced it,
Hmm.
and they sort of got into a fight and kind of parted ways, and literally never spoke until Hitchcock's death. And apparently Herman was very upset about that when he died, because he was hoping that at some point they would have reunited and kind of worked together again, but they never did. But there's a lot of
Yeah,
interesting stuff with that too. So again, that's the one thing I feel like is missing from this movie is like a
yeah,
fantastic Bernard Herrmann
like a
score. Not
really
that it has to be
elevating
used a
score.
lot, but I think that the other thing is that Herman clearly knew when to, like, when it was appropriate to not use music.
Right.
Like he was great at kind of holding back on in certain moments. So I don't think that it would have been something where it's like, oh, there's just music throughout. I think that I would have been so curious to see, but there's kind of layers to that too, because Henry Mancini was supposed to score the movie, wrote a
Hmm.
full soundtrack
I
for
think a
it,
full
and then
soundtrack, a full score.
yeah,
Yeah,
because I think it's like you said, I think it was available. It's
yeah. I
something
think you
you guys
can
should
purchase
listen
it
to it.
now
Yeah,
on re-releases of the
um,
soundtrack.
yeah,
They've
yeah.
included his soundtrack. Yes.
And so and Hitchcock apparently said that his reason for replacing Mancini and firing Mancini was because he said that if I wanted Herman, I would have gotten Herman. And so there's this kind of like,
Do you think
backhanded
that
kind
was
of compliment there.
stylistic, or do you think that was stylistic? Like Hitchcock is saying, look, because this
I think
happens, right?
I think his kind of
Or
accusation
was
was that
it
he was like,
personal?
mentioned he was trying to. Yeah,
Did
who knows?
did something personal happen between those two men where and so his like rejection of a similar sounding soundtrack was more kind of personal, like
Hmm.
I'm pissed at Herman and I don't want anything that even sounds
Yeah, I
like
don't
him
want to
because it
hear his
reminds
music.
me
Yeah,
of
yeah.
him. Or was it like, because look, you get to a point, right? I mean, how many, especially let's take Williams or Herman. I mean, both have sounds that are so similar that it's like their stamp is going to be on your film
Hmm.
no matter what they try to do. I
Yeah,
just
they're
think
as
they're
much of
like,
a part of the film as like the director in a lot of ways. Yeah.
and I totally respect that a director might be like, hey, I want to try something different. This is a
Hmm.
different type of film, or I want to try to go a different direction. And if I continue to use you, I know that it's going to be in this certain space of a soundtrack, and I don't, I really want to go somewhere different. I
Hmm.
can certainly see how that could be potentially, obviously that could get personal, right? If you've worked with somebody for a long time and one of them says, hey, I don't want to use you, yeah, I can certainly see how that might hurt,
Hmm.
I guess,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah. So then in the end, Ron Goodwin
So if
wrote
you
the
ever come to
score.
me and say, I want a new co-host for the
Yes.
podcast, I will be very
Well,
hurt, dude.
the way
If
that
you
I
want to
would
go in a
do it if it
different
was
direction.
Hitchcock was that because Hitchcock actually fired Herman in front of the orchestra. Like he like went in, listened to a recording, and fired him literally, and it was apparently so humiliating for Herman.
So you're going to fire me
Naturally.
while we're recording
So
an
while
episode.
we're recording, I will fire you. I don't know if I have the authority to
Not
do
if I
that,
fire
but
you first. What if I
exactly. Then there'll be nothing. We'll fire each other.
We'll fire
But
each other,
so
yes.
yeah,
And we'll
Ron
hire
Goodwin
two
ended
new
up.
people. No,
Oh
we'll
yes,
just get
yes,
we'll
good
get two
idea.
AIs. We're gonna
Yeah.
like what we'll do is we'll get two different AIs, and we'll both kind of just each program some parameters in each of the two separate AIs, and we'll just like let the
Yes.
AIs have a conversation for an hour and then just record it and put it out
And
there.
it would be perfect for all the TikTok kids. I mean, they love that. That would be
Oh
exactly what we should do
gosh.
with. I mean, we probably could make so
That's
much
going to
money doing
happen.
that.
You know that is totally going to happen, right? Because they
Yeah,
have AIs
it probably
writing
already has
articles.
happened.
I'm sure, and there's probably and obviously it's easy to have like a language AI have just
Hmm.
give it a voice, a
Yeah,
synthesized voice, and then
you can give it your own
boom,
voice. You can let it learn your
there
own
you
voice.
go. You're
But
right. Or
yeah, I mean, who
we could
knows? We
even
could do it right
have
now. We
we
could
could
be
have
AI
it.
right now.
We might be AI right now, but we could do it, right? Like we could take like, so for instance, like this movie, we could have one of the people be like take Alfred Hitchcock's voice, right? Train the AI on Hitchcock's voice, and
Hmm.
then like the other person we could train on De Palma's voice, and then we could have both of them discuss. Like we could have Hitchcock be mad at De Palma for like aping his style, and we could have
Yes.
De
Yeah.
Palma like criticizing Hitchcock, like that. De Palma sees like I did it and did it even better, and we could just see what that would look like for an hour.
Well, it would be. I mean, it would be probably very similar to the real story of Hitchcock and Spielberg, where
Yeah.
Spielberg wanted to meet Hitchcock. It was right after Spielberg did Jaws, which obviously takes a lot of influence from Hitchcock, and wanted to
Right.
meet Hitchcock. And Hitchcock said, "The boy that directed the Fish movie, I don't think so," and
I mean,
kind
but
of
let's be
snubbed
honest though.
Spielberg.
Hitchcock is the boy that directed the Bird movie.
Yes,
So
exactly. That's
I
the
mean,
irony, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, here's what I'm waiting for to happen. It hasn't happened yet, as far as I know, right? Because we had all these Sharknado movies, and I mean, there's ton, right, the Meg, I mean, there's like a ton of kind of this continuation of Jaws type films,
Yeah.
right, with
Yeah.
large fish that are eating people and stuff,
Megalodon. Yeah. Yeah.
right? All that. So, but where is like Birds versus Shark? I've
Oh,
not seen
don't
that.
put that into the universe because I'm sure there's
Oh, it's
probably
out
someone
there.
working on it right
Oh,
now.
oh, maybe that person's me because I mean, we've had like Predator versus Alien, like
Hmm.
Birds versus Shark is, I think that's the next hot thing. Matter of fact, I may need to edit this out because I don't want somebody to steal this idea. It's that good.
Or some AI is going to scrub through the episode and listen to it and start generating that too.
It's already
Um,
being written. As soon as
yeah.
we publish this, an AI is going to grab it. It's going to write a script. It's going to land on some script reader's desk, but the script reader is going to use an AI to scan the scripts instead of reading that. It's just, yeah, I can see it
Yeah.
now.
No, exactly.
Yep,
Exactly.
just this will be on Netflix in 2026.
Yeah. Yeah. But to go to bring it all full
I'm
circle,
sorry.
to return to Hitchcock's
To
frenzy.
return to Earth. To return
So
to
yeah,
Earth.
they ended up he got Ron Goodwin to score it, which again I think is kind of I don't know, it's a bit of a lackluster score. There's a few moments that I actually really like. The one right after
It didn't stand out to
the
my
murder,
ears,
the
but
first
what do I
murder.
know?
There's like a really great kind of creepy sounding little
Yeah.
cue there, and I like that. So it's not all. It's just
I
a
think
little
that's what
bit
it's called.
underwhelming. I think.
Creepy sounding little cue. If you go to the
Yes.
soundtrack, that's
Yeah,
actually what
yeah.
the piece is
Just
titled.
look up
Yeah.
that piece exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's I like this movie a lot. I think it's all in all a very fun, but also disturbing and
It's got a
movie
great
and a good
a great beat, and it's easy to dance to. No,
yes, exactly.
no,
Yeah.
well, and I'm appreciative of you picking it. Like I said, it's funny. I know that I'd seen the film. I had not seen it in a very long time, and it's funny that the only scenes that I really had a strong recollection of were those scenes that we discussed where the chief inspector is eating dinner or having being served dinner by his
Yes, yeah.
wife, and she keeps serving him all of these just outrageous meals, and his struggle to maintain his composure in the while he's starving. It was almost, I felt like it was like a Faulty Towers. Like
Mhm.
I mean, I really got like a vibe of that, and I'm sure it's just because of the extreme Britishness of both of those things. But I just got like a total like John Cleese Faulty Towers vibe going on from those scenes.
Yeah.
Albeit a little more reserved and in toned down from what you would have seen in Faulty Towers. Anywho, on that note, well, thanks for picking the film, man. It was a real treat, and it was a fun time talking with you about it.
Mhm.
So that means now that it's my turn to pick a film, and so I guess I better get on that.
Yeah, we'll see what you
So
pick. Maybe it'll
everybody,
be Trap
yeah,
Shyamalan.
yeah, oh yeah, maybe it's going to be The Happening. Is actually what I
Yeah,
was
there you
thinking.
go. There you go.
There you go. We've only done one film that both of us kind of weren't super thrilled with, and that was the Attack of the Clones.
Yes.
I feel
Yeah.
like Attack of the Clones is Citizen Kane compared to The Happening. So, but anyway, we'll keep everyone in suspense. And speaking of, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate everyone out there. If you have any suggestions for films that you'd like to see us do, well, just look us up, shoot us a line, and.
Mhm.
What is our email address for people?
Well,
that
it's
wanna
all
do
our
that?
socials are in the descriptions of the thing.
Yeah,
So
all our
you can
stuff.
very
Yeah,
easily
you go to
message
you
me
go
up. Yeah.
anywhere. You can Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, except
Comment
it's
on
X or
YouTube,
something
yeah.
now. YouTube, you can comment on YouTube. Yep, we check out all those spots, and all those avenues are ways you can get a hold of us. All right, until next time, we'll catch you on the flip side.
Bye bye.